And when we get the Wi-Fi thing, we'll figure it out from there. I'd like to call the October 26th Hartford School District Board of Directors meeting to order. This is our monthly community engagement meeting. So we will not be conducting a lot of regular business. Are there any changes, additions to the agenda?
We may want to flip-flop ends, revisions in progress with capital projects planning because of our guest who's here.
Our distinguished guest, yes.
Yes,
I think we can do that.
That's not too much trouble.
that makes sense. Are there any other additions, amendments?
No, the only change is under executive session. I've talked with Tom and determined the appropriate classification that is a grievance, not a
Agreements.
not a labor
Okay.
management issue.
Okay,
So
okay, cool.
just so it's on the record.
So can we have a motion to accept the amended minutes?
Move that we accept the agenda as presented and amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. So at this point, we will go ahead into the community engagement piece. So Russ,
Okay, and since we moved to change the order, we'll talk about the capital projects plan. There's been a group of us, the director of facilities, the superintendent, Jeff Marino, one of the assistant principals, and a member of the community, Doug Heavysides, have been getting together periodically, at least maybe once a month, sometimes more frequently, to go forth what our capital project needs and really try to take a planned approach to what we're doing, and also sort of looking at the long view, not just trying to do things to shore it up, but consider it in the context of what our long-range plan may be for some of these facilities. And we've come up with, this is very tentative, because we're also going to be working to refine some things, but we've sort of come up with an ordering that we're going to, for the board to discuss at some point, but we'll introduce it to the public for feedback. Obviously, there's a couple of projects, I didn't say obviously, there's a couple of projects that we've been talking about for a while. The roofs at Ottaquiche and Dothan Brook, the best room in the tech center, which money has been set aside for. It may not be enough because some of these funds were set aside before the pandemic and the craziness that happened with construction costs. But these are things like the roofs, we can't continue to put off. I mean, we're going to have to bite the bullet, and we think we've been responsible in providing for it on an annual basis. And Tom and Doug, please feel free to jump in as I go forth if I miss something or there's something can be added to my spiel here. So after that, we are sort of talking about what are some of the needs of the school community. And one of the things that we're talking about is perhaps renovating the high school bathrooms type thing. And seeing what that would look like, what the cost would be, because they've been with us for 58 years. So I think we've got our money's worth out of it. And it may be time to reinvest. Then from there, we've also discussed some projects related to both the athletic programs and some of the arts programs. For example, and this is very tentative, there's some work that needs to be done in the gym. And as opposed to just doing it spot or as needed or ad hoc, we're seeing, would it make more sense to wrap it in so we can use those spaces to their maximum potential? Because they were designed in, when was the building built?
68.
58.
Okay, and
60.
locker room and other uses have changed substantially. Whoops,
The high school was, the middle school was 50, the high school was 62, I think.
It's in the 60s.
62?
Yeah.
Oh, my birthday. All right.
It's in the 60s.
I think I've aged better, but anyway.
Definitely.
So then, but in context of trying to wrap a project in that makes sense in the long run for the community, because we're very cognizant of the fact that there is only so much money out there and there are needs. And along with that, this is very tentative, is seeing if there can be something for the performing arts, maybe an enhanced facility for that, along with some planning for some office space that currently exists. I think. Is it anything either one of you want to add or any discussion?
I think you pretty much captured it. I think overall, we've done a really good job of staying on top of a lot of the maintenance. The two roofs were a little delayed. We really would have liked to done it a couple of years ago, but with the pandemic and everything, we haven't been able to. But we're still working on it. So it's a little complicated, the roof structures and making sure we do that right with the plan that'll last for way into the future. But the other project, we have a lot of old buildings that need some repair. So I'm trying to look at it from, not 5 years, 10 years, but 30 years down the road. What are the district needs going to be, so that we're good stewards rather than some of the things we've all inherited over the years. So I think Russ captured it well.
So I guess my only question, we started working on a future plan. And the board has been involved in that, at least for the last 12 years. And that extended plan has gone out 25 years, and we were hoping to be able to continually move that in that direction, getting out into the future as far as possible, so that the owners and the boards, as they change and go over time, they've got that that record, not just the historical record of the work, but that future record as well. So is there like a melding of that going on at the same time?
We haven't done that specifically, but I think it's something that we could put together. I don't know easily, but we could certainly put together sort of what we've done and where we're going over the next 20, 25 years. What needs to be done, what will need to be done.
Because it falls in line with the vision, that the board's been, working on, and, and the administrative team, in that regard,
Right.
looking forward, so that we don't get caught in a situation where, we have to do some mega bond,
Right.
to correct something we could have corrected.
Right.
So,
Trying to stay ahead of it.
yeah.
So we certainly know relatively the life expectancies of various systems in the schools, and should be able to map that out fairly well. I mean, we really wouldn't know the enhancement. So
Right.
some of what we're talking about, well, I don't know if it's an enhancement, because we've worn everything fairly well, like the bathrooms. But when we do that renovation, if we do that renovation, it will be both to address the age of the facility and also bring it up to date with what the current needs are. Right now you have 4 bathrooms that are single sex, 1960 style. We haven't touched them. So they would be brought up to current expectations. But the same with, like we could easily map out fire alarms, fire detection, windows, heating systems.
And a lot of the engineering that went into those determinations over time, over the last 10 years, has been moving, forward. So it just seems that it would be really handy to, you know, to continue to have that all in one place so that it's,
Absolutely.
you know, it's,
And,
it's
you know,
very visible.
You would plot on there like roofs, so we
Yeah.
know when we
Yeah.
did roofs, and we've always done a 30-year warranty, so we know 30 years out from when we did the middle school roof just a few years ago. Let's put that in there.
Mhm.
And air handling equipment,
Mhm.
pavement, and some of the bigger items.
Yeah.
What we wouldn't know is something like, you know, theater or arts, performing arts, and
Right. You know, like you said, those are adapting spaces for future needs, you know, in a sense, you know, versus the needed facility systems, maintenance or replacement, you know, which is a good way to approach it. You know, I think that keeps, you know, us in a really strong position as far as knowing when to come back to the public and keeping them abreast of what that could look like. So it isn't a surprise at, you know, the informational meeting, you know, in January. You said what?
well, I think it's an excellent point, because one of the things the committee has spent some time on is being smart about the work we do,
Mm.
because that's not always done. A
Mm.
lot of schools, and just the way that it works is you do things in the moment, and you don't really think about 5 years out or the 10 years out. So for instance, Jonathan brought up today, you know, if you do a project anywhere in the high school or tech center, and you're gonna be forced to update the fire alarm panel and controls.
Mhm.
So you don't just do it for what you have right now, you try to look a little bit in the future.
Mhm.
So if in 5 years you upgrade or you improve or you change the floor plan, you're not having to change the panel again, because
Mhm.
that's expensive.
Mhm.
So how do you sort of try to predict within reason
Mhm.
what you might do in the near future?
Mhm.
So being smart like that is.
Yes, Mr. Merrill.
Two issues. One is with the all too frequent news stories about school shootings and other kinds of security issues. Has there been any consideration of all of what architectural changes might enhance or improve school security? I don't know if there are any. I just was wondering if we thought about it at all.
Mhm.
And the other is that there has been a long-standing reluctance on the part of the state to take any responsibility at all for facilities expenses. But I've heard rumors that they're thinking about revisiting that issue. Is there any likelihood at all that there will be money available outside the money provided directly by our taxpayers from the state or from the feds that would be applicable?
Well, we'll deal with this. I mean, the question of security, we haven't necessarily focused on that, but even in today's discussion, in considering if there's going to be changes made to the athletic facilities, pointing out some of the security deficiencies in our present, for example, the open window pathway and the numerous entrances and exits type thing. And maybe the consideration of having one focal entrance to the gym and having that somewhat separated from the school type thing. So I think there is some of that, Peter, and maybe there could be some more, but I mean, I think that will be a component as we go forth. It's much like the fire and alarm system. We have to do it, but we're going to do it in a way that leverages work we may already be doing versus trying to do it all at once for the existing facility type thing. And the coach might know more about the possibilities of additional monies from the state, but I guess the work we're doing here, if there is more money, we'll use the current buzz term, shovel ready. We may have some shovel ready projects that we can say, hey, type thing.
Well, that's part of the planning component, you know, having a 25-year plan or whatever we want to put on it, you know, we could say 50-year plan, whatever. But at the end of the day, those projects that are shovel ready are the ones that usually get first approval. So clear planning really comes into play. We have a standing safety committee that meets on a regular basis. And so that committee is feeding information into the facilities committee as far as, what are the current needs. And that's a pretty robust group of folks, considering that, when Tom put that one together, it included a number of different entities within the school district that were involved in keeping our kids safe. The police department, fire department are all sit on that committee. So that's a valuable resource, I think, for us as well around that question.
It's just that often security is thought of in terms of increased police presence or guards or things like that. You don't always think about how architecture can kind of affect the security of a facility as well. And if we're thinking about items to take into consideration, I would just think that it would make sense to have that as one more factor we consider. It would not be determinative by itself, but it ought to be relevant and something we're paying attention to.
Absolutely, and I think where Coach brought up a good point that we can tie what we're doing, because I mean, we're sort of looking short term, but also to the 25-year plan. And as we've gone through this process, we've also learned more information that was not available to us when that plan was developed, I think. So one of the things I think the board should consider is maybe it doesn't have to be a continuous committee, but maybe once or twice or 3 times a year, having a facilities planning committee meetings each year. So it doesn't get like this year, then we'll do it 5 years from now, 5 years, because should be a living document, because we don't necessarily know what education is going to look like fully in 5 years.
I think you nailed it, that term. It is a living document. I think when I recall boards talking about this, that plan, I think that was the intention, that it would be this living, breathing document, something that anybody could go to at any point in time. That's the vision, the dream piece. We're not quite there yet, but that's the vision, that you could open this thing. Oh, wow. Geez, they're thinking about that. Okay, cool. And see that, so I think we're on the right path.
Russ, if I can add.
Certainly.
There was a session at last week's conference all about a bill that one of your colleagues in the House is sponsoring for facility money.
Yeah.
And so they are gearing up to figure out how to support this, but the Department of Ed has done an assessment of they've done a survey of all the needs of all the districts, and so we've kind of quantified some of the projects that are out there and how much money. So we're definitely gearing up, hoping that this bill gets turned into a law and is passed, and we get some money. So I don't know how much. There's an awful lot of deferred maintenance and projects around the state.
Several districts that have very, very, very large projects that are sort of sitting in hold.
Yeah. The superintendents that were in the room were polled right during the meeting, and it went from anywhere from $6 million to $200 million.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
there's a lot of projects out there.
It's actually a little scary, but when you think about it, it's in the billions. When I was on House Ed, when we had actually a department in the agency that functionally was looking at facilities, that number was bordering on the scary numbers, and sometimes what is sad is that um, that harms the process, instead of looking at, new strategies for addressing and dealing with the issue. It's like, oh my goodness, and then people's eyes roll in the back of their head and everything else, and nothing happens
Yeah.
sometimes.
In terms of safety and security, Coach is right. We have a very active safety team that meets monthly. So any safety needs or building upgrades are sort of handled through that group. But we've done a lot in terms of making the building safer. I mean, there are always things that you would consider a new construction that we wouldn't consider now, like a lot of new schools have very little, few windows on the first floor, things of that nature. But, we've really secured our exits and, entries into the school and card access everywhere and camera systems. So we're pretty good in that arena. I mean, there's always more you can do. But you're always cautious too, to make sure the school is welcoming and not.
Yes, nobody wants to learn in a bunker.
Right. But it is something that's on the forefront of our mind with every project. We've kept up on that though in the operating budget, which.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Heavysides, is there anything you'd like to add to this discussion about facilities planning?
Is it on? I guess. My biggest concern is your image, the citizens of this town. We have great facilities. The first time we sat down and I looked at that flow sheet, I have to admit, I was somewhat taken back when I started looking at the dollar figures. It's sobering, and even more so of what's happened to us in the last 6 months. Construction dollars, whatever. I mean, it's out of sight. But I really want to see an environment in which we get to town meeting and there should be no, oh my, what, you're crazy, where'd this come from? We should have a flow sheet that's available to the public, knowing that it's a working sheet, so will flow up, it will go down. But there shouldn't be any surprises. And somebody moving to this town should be able to look at this and say, okay, over the next 10 years, they're planning that it's going to cost $15–20 million to maintain what we've currently got. You want to move here and bring your children to a good place? That's fine. If you're worried about your dollars and you don't want to support that, then potentially you should look elsewhere. But I'm just looking for something that is great for you, great for our children, with no surprises. Because we've all learned over the course of a number of years here, surprises don't go well in this town. And things get shot down when they really shouldn't. And it's only because people don't know or don't understand, because there's been no one around to explain it to them. So that's my 2 cents. I'm thrilled that we're doing what we're doing. It just can't move fast enough. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heaviside.
Yes, thank you very much.
It's the wisdom of Mr. Heavisides is well taken. I think those of us that who've been, in this community for an extended period know all too well the times that we haven't been as forward thinking, and people came surprised to those meetings and what the outcomes were. So his point is really well taken around us ensuring that we're visible about it and that it's accessible. I think that the board page is a great place to have that, that chart and plan available. and hopefully easily accessible in a format. Because people are more interested nowadays, they'll say, well, where can I find that? And so to be able to direct them, and say, if you look at the board's, page, you'll see, there it is. So we have it linked on our Facebook page and on our district page, board's page within the page. And there's a couple of direct instances people can look at and go, yep, if I want to find out something about where their thinking is and what the recommendations might come over time, there it is. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Any other discussion? All right. So now we'll go back to the original and we'll discuss ends, revisions, and progress. And I'll just give a brief introduction, then I'll turn it over to the superintendent and his team. I think one of the things is the ends policies were initially drafted in 2008, and they've served the test of time well. However, like anything else, our environment has changed, so it's good to periodically review them and make sure they're still relevant, because really the relevance of these ends policies this is what we hope all of our students, the skills and attributes that when they graduate the Hartford School District have in their possession or toolkit under today's buzzwords. So, and the next part of that, because this isn't evolving, even though it was started in 2008, is working on indicators. So when it comes time to present a budget, we'll be able to give some type of substantiation, whatever it would be, to the public to know, because embedded in all these discussions is for the cost that's justified. Unfortunately, while the taxpayers here in Hartford have been very generous with their support of the school systems, none of us have endless pockets, because my lottery just hasn't cut it yet. So we are cognizant of the need to justify our expenditures in light of the success of our students. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Okay, we have a short presentation to show, just to encapsulate, summarize what the board and the administration did this summer with the ends, and also talk about how we think we should move forward. And of course, the board and can change that or amend that however they see fit, or add or suggest something. So take it away, Roy and Julie.
Great. So some of this is just some background and some review of what we've done and what we were thinking. So this is just providing sort of some context in addition to what Russ has shared. So this summer we had met and did some of that beginning work to revisit the ends policies and really think about them in terms of their relevance and their indicators. And so we had also elicited feedback from the board about the reporting system. And so some of the feedback that we received that we are incorporating into our plan moving forward this year is more frequent reporting, more varied types of evidence, quantitative and anecdotal, more longitudinal data that shows trends and patterns over time, that Tom will do the reporting, or a designee of Tom's, that will be more focused on student outcomes, as opposed to maybe activities or things happening in schools, but really looking at outcomes across the district, that will identify both strengths and areas for future attention, and that we're really going to do some work, as I just mentioned, on revising and updating the ends descriptions and indicators to make sure that they're still relevant and meeting the needs of the district. So some of the things that we discussed this summer and some of the work that we did involved considering taking the 6 current ends policies and consolidating them into fewer, perhaps 3. And so some of the ideas that we had were taking academic excellence and maybe thinking about that more in terms of personal excellence, learner agency, something like that, combining life skills with health and well-being, maybe that becomes well-being, combining citizenship and global awareness, perhaps to global citizenship. So these are just some of the things that we're starting to brainstorm that will take the technology ends policy that is existing now and integrate some of those indicators across the other ends policies, and that, you know, considering the alignment of our ends policies to Vermont Agency of Education's Portrait of a Graduate. So just thinking about that as well as we look at some of these things. So we are currently looking at the work that we did this summer, the suggestions and revisions that were given to us, and starting to do some working with those and drafting some updated revisions that we can share out. So our goal is to have those ready to share with the board in January. That will have a community engagement opportunity coming after that. And then we'll have some final revisions by June. So that's the sort of process of the revisions that we're working on. And this was all taking into consideration some work that, again, we did this summer together with the board to really delve into those policies and indicators. So right now, as I said, we're working our way through that and you know, getting ourselves you know, into that work for the January timeline that we had set aside. In terms of reporting, we're piloting a system for reporting this year that will focus on just 2 of the ends policies to really sort of hone in this process. So looking at academic excellence and health and well-being, Tom will be presenting district level data, like an overview of district level data 3 times this year that will include the qualitative and quantitative data sources, really focusing again on outcomes, highlights, and areas of future attention. Principals may be invited to come to one of those board meetings to share some of their specific examples, anecdotes, contributions to some of that overall district data to kind of complement what's being shared already. So that reporting format might look like Tom sharing those high level overview, data overviews, and then again, principals complementing that with some of their own information. And then really thinking about what these data show in terms of the ends policies, what strengths and areas of focus they suggest, and then what programmatic and budgeting decisions have been made to support this work. So based on the data that we're looking at and based on what we're seeing at the district level, what are the things that we're putting in place, and what decisions are being made, and then what additional steps are being considered to address those areas of focus. And so just the last thing that we'll share is we're sort of thinking about this timeline of the first reporting maybe being that December 14th meeting, then February, and then June. And part of the reason for these particular dates is because they fall after assessment windows where we'll have large amounts of data that we can be really delving into in order to bring the most current information to everybody. So that's sort of just a high level overview of some of the things that we've been thinking about and working on and where we're at. And if there's anything I missed or Roy you'd like to share.
No, I think that the key there is that this will be a chance for us to gather some feedback in terms of with 3 distinct reporting out times meet the needs of the board, understanding of what's going on in the district better than a one-time meeting in March, the end of March, early April, from all the principals in one fell swoop. You hear from everybody at the same time. So this is up for modification, but it's all about meeting your all's needs about what's going on in our district and how to meet the needs of our students.
Well, one of the things I think that, you know, we've always been confronted with is the requirement for board approval of an action plan, you know, by the state. So what we've kind of had hanging over our heads, and we've tried to make it more reliable for us, you know, collectively as a district, and not just, yeah, we did this, we did that, this is the plan, and we sign off.
Mhm.
That's not what we've been, we've been evolving over, everybody can recall where we started some of the conversations and how they've changed, over time. And what I find interesting, and, as you talk to the folks at AOE, we've been on target. And I'm really pleased about that, for our district, which means that, Tom's leadership and the administrative team has kept us in a very good position. Now it's time to kick it into the next gear. When I think about, as you were talking, Julie, I was thinking about Chris Snedden, who was a board member and, professor of geography at Dartmouth. He and Gabrielle Luke, who, is a, hallmark member of our community in so many different ways. They were on the lead portion of the team that helped the community engagement part of the development of the ends. Going to, the libraries in town, meeting with community members to develop these. And it would be interesting, at some point to maybe extend an invitation to one of these sessions to ask if they would come back and see, like if we basically kind of achieved some of that, original vision. Because a lot of the things that we keep talking about with indicators and, how do you measure, and how do you tell, and that picture of what does a Hartford graduate, what is our expectation? What is our vision of a Hartford graduate? And that would just be fascinating to do it.
Before we get into, and anybody can jump in here, I think it would be helpful if somebody gave some background on what is portrait of a graduate, so for the people at home.
Probably pull it up
Yeah,
pretty
pull it up.
quickly. Yeah.
The AOE one.
Yeah, so the Vermont Agency of Education has what's called a portrait of a graduate that they have developed, and basically it's that profile of students graduating from Vermont schools. What are some of the characteristics that we are preparing them to go out in the world with? What are they leaving our schools with? And so Roy's gonna pull it up, and there are 6 indicators with portrait of a graduate, and so they're very aligned to our ends policies. They're not dissimilar. And basically, as we are thinking about there it is, our ends policies, just thinking about how that we're continuing to align to, that are there similarities and commonalities? Is there a way to crosswalk in some ways some of these characteristics, because they are very closely aligned to what our ends policies are promoting as well. So,
And the bullets underneath, I think, might start to lean along what you're looking at, Russ, in terms of when they say global citizenship, it gives you students recognize that the world is increasingly complex and independent. So you would have some distinct bullets that you might be then looking for some student evidence as a whole, but you could also drill all the way down to an individual student if you wanted to. So.
Okay, thank you. I think since we have the end policies and there's 6 of them, we are continuously working to attain all 6. But maybe you could give some of the background as why we chose, because we can't do it all, and we can't be strong or focus everywhere. Why we chose the 2 we did.
for this year's focus?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we were choosing academic excellence and health and well-being primarily because these were 2 areas that nationwide data was showing are the areas that students have shown the greatest decrease across, just nationwide data is showing that reading and math scores have decreased dramatically across all grade levels, as well as students' mental health and social emotional well-being. So we felt like those were two areas that, because there's just so much research out there showing those have been areas of that really need attention for students, that we thought those would be really important areas for us to focus on this year.
And in the past, it seems like the board has indicated they would like a little more in-depth information. So rather than do all 6 and try to provide all that in-depth, really focus on 2 and really be able to get into more of the details. There was an article just this week in the New York Times about the NAEP scores, which is the National Assessment of Educational Performance, and showed a big decrease in 4th and 8th grade in reading and math. Specifically, math is what everyone is very concerned about because of the pandemic, and trying to figure out ways in which educators can intervene and try to turn that around. That's no different here. So that's part of why we, chose these 2.
So would I be correct in my presumption then, when it comes time to actually present the budget, initiatives on these 2 would be then highlighted as part of, this is what the budget we're going to accomplish as part of,
Exactly.
okay.
If I may, one of the big discussions that boards have been having, and entities have been having is, what does your budget really say? And I think what we've been talking about and what we talked about at the retreat, was how do we share with the public? And I think, Russ and Hava, have been doing a good job with our community engagement piece, especially around helping us frame that narrative, as far as how do we explain how functional our budget is around these ends, and the importance of the individual pieces of that, and the fact that the board is showing clear support to our students and then our administration in getting to that point. Because it would be really weird if we just said, no, we're only going to spend this and we're only going to do this. And if you guys can figure out how to do that other stuff, it's okay. and that's what happens though in some budgeting processes. We're trying to shift ours to be very clear, so anyone that looks at it goes, okay, I see where they're going, and it makes sense, and that goes back to what Mr. Heaviside was talking about around not surprising folks, because they know what our intentions are. So,
And looking at our budget should be able to say to people, I'm looking at their budget now, I can see what their priorities are. And I think that's really important, especially now in our community. They need that.
That alignment, I think, is critical, and that's what can be very divisive in the school system, where a board or the community is demanding or expecting a high level of performance in a certain area, or and then not putting the money and the resources into it, and the administration and the teachers are going, how are we supposed to do this? You want us to make sure we do a really great job with the supporting the mental health needs of the students, but yet you cut 4 positions, or you didn't fund the new curriculum that we said we needed to support this math, the math performance. Or we have no money for or time for professional development for our staff to improve their skills in addressing whatever it is. So it makes sense for all of us to be on the same page with this stuff. And there are only so many dollars to go around. It's only so much resource, and we need to be focused and say, yeah, we're really concerned about this, we're gonna do something. And it's concerted effort, so.
And this is probably a minor detail, especially since I'm the dubious person who gets to present, but the February dates. We meet the 2nd and 4th of each month. The 15th is the 3rd.
Oh,
Whoops,
So I
yeah,
would push for the 8th,
yeah,
Yeah.
no, that should be,
just because that would be in advance of the public meeting.
Yeah.
And that would then dovetail nicely on.
Yeah.
What we're trying to communicate to the public as to why the investment is worth it.
It's a
that
preview.
makes
It becomes a true. preview.
perfect.
yeah, the meeting that month is the 8th. So, sorry about that.
It's a minor point, but
Yeah.
at least
But it happened, yeah.
the context is before the informational meeting.
Mm,
Because one of the questions that come up is, how do we know? And this would be, should be a direct response to how do we know? I mean, it's not gonna be complete because we're focusing on these two areas, but it would still be substantive. And by having success in these two areas, the rest sort of spills over.
mm, mm. Good point.
Makes sense.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. Okay, we'll go to the next topic generally, which is communication. And one thing that the board and the head of the Community Engagement Committee needs to do much better about is getting the word out. So we will hold him accountable wherever he is.
Oh. As we look.
As we look, yes. However, having said that, in each meeting's board packet, I think is our annual work plan. And under the column linkage meetings is essentially what we are, another term for our community engagement meetings, which are the 4th Wednesday of each month. And we have some topics, excuse me, delineated. For example, the next one or next two, not surprisingly, are going to be somewhat weighted towards the budget and the upcoming vote. And then once we get past that, we are going to focus in on updates on the ends revisions. And frankly, if we can, with enough public support, we could probably dedicate a couple of meetings to that, because as was alluded to, when they were first developed, there was an outreach to libraries, and so we should make an effort, conceded effort for public outreach, which was part of the plan. But the community engagement meetings may serve as a great platform for that. And we also have some diversity trainings planned, one for, I think, May, and one probably for early in the new year.
This up so people can see it, what you're.
What's that?
You want me to post it up?
Sure,
so that they can-
That's probably a better idea. Thank you.
For our visual learners.
Yeah, we can see how well I scripted this. So it is,
Fortunately, is there a way to shrink this, Chico? I'm sharing my screen, but it's what I can see and what is on the board. Is there a way to shrink that slightly?
Maybe you need to. Right here, 100%.
Should be all of them getting from. Yeah.
Sorry, Russ, I didn't mean you to break stride, but I thought maybe folks wanted to see what you were saying.
that's not a problem. Because it's, and you can barely see it because it's ghosted, but basically it's column J on the spreadsheet that's up there.
Yeah, we've got the whole thing on.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. Oh, that's bad.
And I mean, as they're dealing with the technical difficulties here, this annual work plan is also delineates various reports the board members generate, as well as reports that the superintendent provides to the board. And they're all listed by the corresponding number in our policies which are listed on the website. For example, EL 10, which is our equity policy, there's due to be a monitoring report in December given by the superintendent. So
We need to do a little work on that linkage meeting column, so. Not tonight. but
Right.
between now.
But-
And I think one of the things about that as well is it goes back to the comment that you made earlier, Russ, about this being a living document, especially the community engagement piece. This was reviewed during our retreat, and it just gave us an umbrella. Kind of a protection of, these are the things we really think we need to get it, across this school year. But as you know, life kind of throws all kinds of different curves and whatnot. So there's going to be times that a meeting might have a little different focus than we had originally thought, because there's something really emerging that's critical to our work with the community. And then, and we adapt, and that's what we've done. And you guys have done a good job doing that. So I think that flexibility needs to stay in place, to a degree.
That linkage column is sort of the newest part of completing this work.
Yeah.
So in the years leading up to this one, we were really focused on getting the monitoring reports sequenced with the work at that time of the year.
Yeah.
So I think we've accomplished that. Now we were trying to build in the community engagement meetings to be relevant to the monitoring reports and the work at that time of the year. So we need to take, if you see this 2 ends reporting, those really are inaccurate now. That was kind of based on what we did last year.
Right.
So we need to move those into the dates Julie just spoke about. So in December 14 and February 8. The reason the 15th, the same as the second meeting in November and the second meeting in February fall in like a holiday period. So we need to decide if we're gonna meet, and if so, what day we're gonna meet. That's why they're sort of off track, not the fourth Wednesday.
Right.
And it is a living document, but also as we refine it, it will give people a chance to plan ahead,
Oh, yeah.
because we all have busy schedules. I mean, us board members have this blocked out, but people who may be interested in the NZU, it would be nice from their perspective to have an idea that I should try to make whatever meeting type thing. And I guess the other part of this, these meetings are intended to be interactive. So the community might be able to present topics that they would like us to discuss. And I mean, a couple of these other items are somewhat in that same genre, but I think the more we do it and the better we get at it, I hope to have this much more of an interactive process.
It's evolving, which is cool, because I think that's what makes it feel so credible, because it's not just this is what we're gonna do, and if anybody doesn't like it, it's not like that. We're trying to be sensitive to where we're at, today, as a school district, and where we'd like to see ourselves, in the future. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, for our next meeting, I will update it with what we know now. Put in the topics that I'm
Mhm.
aware of,
Mhm.
and we can maybe sort of build it out.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All right, so now we see board responsibilities and authority, and I think my purpose in putting this here is to help people understand actually what powers we have as individual board members versus as a whole. Because I know people come to me and say, give me various questions, various problems. And it happens to the rest of us, I know. And it's important to realize that as individual board members, we can listen. But we can't respond or shouldn't respond. We have no specific authority to fix something. I don't know how many times people said, can't you get that fixed, Russ? No. And we determine what the appropriate action is. It can be, and please feel free to jump in as people think of things, like maybe it will bring it to the attention of the superintendent. Maybe it'll be something that should be mentioned in our public engagement or comment section saying, I heard about this, what's going out there. But it's really important to realize that there is only so much individual authority vested in a board member type thing. Anybody want to expand on what I just said?
So I think it's important to understand that the way the board functions is set forth in our policies. And the policies have specific language around the authority of individuals as individuals who make up the board, which is basically, except for the chair, who's got some exceptions, none. Basically, unless we're all sitting together and having a conversation in front of the public that has been warned, we can't make a decision. If we do that, we're not only violating the open meeting law, but we're working against our own policies and the way we function. So that needs to be understood. Additionally, the board is not involved in the day-to-day running of the school district. The board is established to think about the strategic and policy and higher level aims of the district. And that means that most of the issues which individuals will have aren't in our wheelhouse anyway. We can, is appropriate, sometimes bring something to the superintendent. Usually our response will be to something to the equivalent of, have you talked to your child's teacher? You did. Okay. Then did you talk to the principal of the school? Okay, you did. Now you can go talk to the superintendent. If the superintendent can't deal with it, then it becomes a board issue. But there's a process in place which tries to get the issue solved at the appropriate level and the appropriate level of knowledge for things. So it is rare for it be appropriate for something to come all the way up, particularly as one of our functions is to do the governance function you see all the time. The other is we're sort of the last court of appeal, which means that we have a quasi-judicial role, which Coach keeps on talking about. And that means that if you come to us with your problem and we get all involved in it, we're not in a position to be an impartial judge, and we may well have to then recuse ourselves. So we need to act in such a way that if any issue gets escalated up the chain and the person who is escalating it is not happy with the outcome, when they come to us, we are in a position to actually provide some help by being an independent judge who's reviewed what happened. So there are these limitations in place for a reason. But if you've sort of grown up watching the way politicians pretend to act on TV or something, you're going to be surprised this is how we work. And we're not doing it to get people to run around. We're doing it because this is the way that we have found over time that we are most effective in representing the needs of our community not interfering where we're not experts in the running of the schools, yet still providing oversight.
Is that not something that, I agree with all this, but is this not something that we could put in the parent handbook? Don't we give up parent handbooks at the beginning of the year?
Yes,
Well,
actually,
that-
one of the documents in your packet tonight is,
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, that's something I wrote years ago that's always worked for us.
Mhm.
I certainly could add to it. You know, to put the piece in that Peter just outlined about when the board gets involved.
Right.
But, yeah, I think it would be a good idea to put that in front of the handbook.
Because it's
Right.
not just parents that come to
Right.
us board members.
Mm.
So
It's community members.
it's community members and even some
Grandparents.
staff that, you know, they're just,
And by the way, we might, it's not a bad thing. that you do
No.
that.
Right.
It's
No.
just, the reaction you're going to get may not be what you expect it to be,
Exactly.
because there are constraints placed on what we can do.
exactly.
And that's part of the reason why, you know, we've gone to great lengths, you know, especially on our business meetings. To add, you know, our list of process for community engagement. And I think that one of the things we found out, you know, during the conference is that with issues coming up the way that they do at school board meetings, having a clear process for how we will address those issues is paramount. Because if people are confused about our role, how it fits, how it works, then, you know, that's the path that they're coming. You know, so I think going back to Russ's point about communication and education, we have a function in that as a board as well, as far as informing our community about the process. You know, both, you know, as a complaint component or just as a public comment and what to expect from a public comment.
And I think it would be, this is my throwing an idea out here. But I think it would be a good idea for, say, 2 board members or just 1 board member to go to the very start of a PTO meeting. And say, let me explain how we function. So that you know, and be very, I think the more information we give to the public, no matter who that public might be, the easier, hopefully, it will be for them to go to step 1, 2, 3, 4,
Mhm.
instead of
Mhm.
jumping from 0 up here to 4, or now we've been friends with for 20+ years, and now they're not even speaking to me because you didn't do anything about my situation.
Yeah.
It happens,
But
you know it does.
And you know,
Been
it's
doing
not to
this long
say you
enough.
won't do something, it's just that it's an incredibly inefficient business model,
Mm.
sort of.
Mm.
To go, you know, over the chain, jump the chain of command.
Right.
It's not to say that eventually you won't get to the board. But, you know, for people do this with me all the time. They call me, they know me, they've seen me somewhere or whatever. And they want me to go investigate, you know, why the bus was late last Tuesday in Queechee. And it's like, well, I can do that and I can drop everything and take that on and find out and get back to you and give you an answer. But that's, you know, really an incredibly inefficient way to use the superintendent. The better idea would be either call the bus company or call the principal, secretary in the school and say, what happened last Tuesday? My kid was 15. No one wants to hide that answer from you. They're glad to tell you, but sometimes it just goes that route. And, you know, at whatever step, if it's not resolved, it goes to the next step. I'm happy to resolve people's complaints, but it's often really, I have to basically go work backwards in a very inefficient manner to find out the answer when the person could have went right to the source and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. One, because I've had students in the district, and I have taken the personal opinion that if somebody even asked me, like, was this a good assignment? Or is that a good teacher? I don't comment. Because again, I have to be cognizant of the fact that they may not recognize I'm commenting as a parent versus a member of the school board. And this also comes into play because there's a joint committee. We have the H committee that is a joint committee. And I have been very careful not to bring anything into discussion that relates to town business. Again, under that same principle of the school district has no real authority, stature, whatever the right word is, in the operations of the town. I may have a opinion as a resident, but in a forum like that, it's not appropriate for me to express those. So sometimes it's very frustrating because even good, sometimes I really haven't commented because you just don't know type thing. So it's better to say no comment versus only the good and not the bad, because people can read into what you say type thing. So it's a little bit of a tightrope that we as board members have to walk in terms of dealing with our friends, our clients, and fellow parents type thing.
Yeah. The other thing that I've fallen into in times when I've tried to be helpful, thinking, well, maybe it would be the most efficient way to answer this person's question. I inevitably or inherently don't know the whole story. So I've responded to what they've said to me. And there might be more information that they're either not aware of or they didn't tell me. So then I'm like in this awkward place of, oh, well, this should have been handled that way. Well, I didn't know this one key piece of information that changes the whole outcome. And that's awkward because then I have to backtrack and apologize to the person and apologize to the principal who I just stepped on when they may have done nothing wrong.
I think that's another perfect example of,
Yeah.
we need to be so very open and very, very clear. This is how this works, and this, if you have a problem, then you need to start down here on step one. Don't jump up to step four.
I think, when I put my teacher hat, I go to pictures. And no matter what student you're standing in front of, when you can draw a picture of what you're trying to get across, you can see clarity in that student's face. You can see the light go off, so to speak. And you go, oh, wow, they heard your words, but they're still trying to formulate that picture. So back to Nancy's suggestion is maybe once you've done this narrative piece, just put a little flow chart, at the bottom. So they go, oh, you mean I should have went to my teacher, my principal this way, instead of reading this. And that's what it's saying. But some folks might not get it.
This is a lot of words.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
But it was meant to sort of explain.
Right.
Not that we don't want to help you,
Right.
but
But it's a process piece. That situation that we had just a few days ago, that I shared with you and Russ, is exactly what Nancy was talking about. Being, I've known that person since 1973. Okay. To give you, like a history. So of course he was going to come, and I had to explain to him that we have a very clear process to ensure that his grandchild's best interest is served. And that's why it's in place. And that's what we attempt to do. We're not saying it's perfect, but we're just saying we try to the best of our ability to work through that, because that's the ultimate goal. And once people understand that, it's like, oh, wow, okay, that makes sense. So,
And we have to remember too that not staff wise, but community wise, there are people out there that can't read this.
right.
And if they could read it, they're not really able to comprehend what it says. And we've got people that don't speak English. And so the idea of having, look, I'm not sure how you would label it so that they could understand it, but we need to be very aware that there are, remind ourselves all the time that there are people out there that don't have this level of education to be able to even read it and understand it. So how are we going to make sure that they understand what we're trying to get to them to help them
Yeah.
and their children?
Right. There are also the one last thing that we haven't talked about. There are times when something on the surface appears very simple, but yet there might be a rule or a law or a legal insurance response that I know that you may not be aware of. And oftentimes that guides how I have to respond. So no, we can't do that because you wouldn't be insured if you do that. So I know it seems like an easy fix, but can't pick the kid up in our personal car and drive them from here to there because.
Any further discussion on that?
So I can certainly simplify that, make sure it's in the different languages and do a flow chart. I think we'd also like to consider one for the student handbook, but also for the staff handbook,
Yeah,
Yep.
that's very
because we
good.
get a lot of issues that go sideways. That group too.
Definitely. Okay, the next, we're gonna talk about a video that we all watched at the School Boards Association meeting we attended last week. And it was a very powerful video. However, to contradict that, I can't remember the name.
Listen up, listen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it was, I mean, we all came, and I don't want to speak for my fellow board members, but I came away very moved by it because it was done by Vermont students and expressed problems expressed to them by other Vermont students type thing. And one of the things that we as a board in the district is considering is how best we can use that and leverage it in discussions with students, the public, and all responsible or interested parties type thing. Anybody want to add anything? I think.
You don't need me.
Okay,
All right, so I have to agree with Russ. This was an outstanding film. So I've talked with VSBA people today about it and expressed some of my concerns already that I had shared with at the end of the conference when some of our VSBA boards were sitting around and talking about the conference and kind of debriefing a little bit right then. So some of our main concerns, and no, I want to bring this film in. Y'all know I do. This is outstanding. I mean, if you haven't seen it, it will blow you away. It will get you thinking and you go, oh my gosh, how did I not catch all of this before? Where was my understanding? Why have I not even thought about some of these things that these kids did? And this also is a musical, and the kids did all the music for it and did all the lyrics for it. So some of their main concerns are how we're going to present it to the public. And we need to make sure that we have enough mental health people at any and every showing that we use it, because this is going to bring up some real strong emotions. And it's going to be for the kids that are watching it, for the students that are watching it, for parents. And I think it's going to be especially hard for parents because it's some parts of the film are going to be, I think, are going to be bringing out some feelings for parents that are, number one, anger. Oh, you can't do that. You can't say that. That's not okay. That's against every belief I ever have. My child would never. It's going to bring up some emotions with some of the kids that maybe have held back on some of their feelings and their thoughts. And now, well, maybe it will really be okay for me to talk to my parents about this situation. And even for some staff that might have not had a whole lot of experience working with some of these kids, like some of the things that they're talking about with the kids, and how do they talk about it with the kids, and how are we going to bring it into our school once we've shown the film? How are we going to use it? How's it going to best benefit our students? So I think that, number one, I know you've talked to Bess, right, Coach?
Mhm.
Did you say yes? And I had talked to her a little bit at the conference. And so I know there's a whole lot of planning, pre-planning that we need to do before we actually put the film to the out to the public. And I just want us to be really sure. Oh, I'm sure we were sure that we want to do it. I just want to make sure that we've covered as every base that we can even imagine might happen, so that it is received in a positive manner and not a negative manner. Did that all make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, that's what we talked about today, and some of those thoughts we had talked a little bit about at the conference amongst us at our table. Which, by the way, for the public's information, Hartford School District was the only district in the state of Vermont that had every board member and our superintendent both days at the conference. I think that is something to be very proud of.
Oh, yeah.
And I am very proud of that. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the film. And bring tissue. Thoughts?
Anybody else?
I think that was an admirable coverage of the nature of the film. It deals with the issues that are causing stress and angst among our
Yes.
student bodies throughout the state. And because they are issues that cause such stress, they are issues that have a lot of emotional content. My reaction was, I have never seen such an uplifting, depressing movie. The subject matter was one downer after another, but somehow in combination with the way in which it was presented in something, it was very uplifting at the same time. And I think it will be an interesting source of conversation for a long time.
And the issues are not going to go away.
No.
At all.
I think it's, your points are well taken, Nancy. I think we need to I need to thoroughly sort of vet it with my teammates and my co-workers and the administration to figure out what and when and how to support the showing.
And she does have a
Been a lot
discussion
of-
manual.
Yeah, she does, and she has a whole card deck
Mhm.
of ways that you can present and questions to ask and ways to structure
Right.
the discussion. I just need a little time to figure out how to present that well. And I don't know, Maggie hasn't seen it yet. Roy and Julie haven't had an opportunity to watch it yet, and we just haven't been able to really discuss. Not that we're the end all be all. We need to figure out, is this a student supported activity? Is it an outside community agency supported activity? Is it, the administration of the board and I showing it to the community, saying this is.
Well, I'm gonna answer that as not as the chair of the board, but in my capacity doing this work for all of my life. Everything you said is part of what we need to do. It isn't just a board community piece. It's a board school community piece. We have an opportunity to engage the Hartford community, the Hartford school community, in a discussion that is needed at this day in time. And I'm saying that very distinctly. One of our students, who happens to be my daughter, had an encounter yesterday that fitted into the framework of the film. She moved to her new apartment, and her roommate, who happens to be a friend who is transgender. I'll give you this Cliff Notes version of the story, and then you'll understand why I'm mentioning it at all. Because when you understand, that racism and systemic issues are prevalent constantly. This is just another example. She drove from Vermont to Chicago. The moving company shows up at the condo with her belongings. She goes back to her car to get some things out of her car, and her car was gone. A neighbor. Now this is, you formulate your own understanding of what's going on here. This older white guy calls the property management company and says, there's an odd car parked in front of this condo. Right. Now there's a moving truck. My daughter's car from out of state. Duh. So she had to pay $260 to get her car back today, because it happened yesterday, and any other fees because of this, discrimination and lack of just, that's why we need to show this film. That's why we need to have the discussion. It's going on, it's happening all the time. The kids talk about it in the film.
Yes.
It's real,
Yes.
and you can't hide behind it, and I think we would be doing a disservice to our community if we didn't find a way to help share this very poignant message, at this time. We're not asking anyone to change directly, but we're just asking people to understand what's really going on. And it's real. It's real. You can, it just, when you have the opportunity, you'll see. But those of us that live it every day, it's even more poignant, that we need to address this issue. But I also have a lot of respect for our team, here, and the folks that we work with, to understand that we'll get it right. It's not a perfect science, but we've got a lot of supports we've built in, to our district. And we continue to grow and build more supports into our district all the time around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what it's about. We want our kids to not have to feel fear every day. And I'll just very quickly share another example that I haven't shared, with the board. Imagine being a parent in a school district in our state and making a decision that your child will no longer go to that school because of what she encountered every day. And what it was hearing the N-word every single day at a high school in our state. And she said, I'm not going to spend my senior year doing that. Having to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
So it's real, and people can say whatever they want to say, but that's a fact. And it's happening. And it's incumbent upon us to try to help our community be different.
We want our school to be a safe place. I saw
All
for all of our children. I was over at the high school the other day. We were doing registration for kids to vote. I mean, for 18-year-olds and up to vote. And I saw a sign that was right behind Heather's desk. And it said, "This is a safe place." And I thought, oh my God, I had seen that sign before. I love that sign. Everybody can see it. Kids walk by it all the time, parents and and stuff. And I thought, oh, I love that sign. It should be plastered all over the school, not just behind Heather's desk. I want to give one example, and then I'll be quiet. Maybe a couple of years ago, up here in our school district, one of the kids in our school came out of the closet to this child's parents, and the parents kicked this child out of their house immediately. And she happened to be a friend of my granddaughter's. And my granddaughter came to me and said, "Can she come stay with you?" I said, "Absolutely." This child that was kicked out of their home because of this child's disclosure is now in college, doing very well. Her parents, this child's parents, just still do not speak to them. And such a heartbreaker. And I keep, when I saw that film, I thought, oh, wouldn't it have been nice if they had some way to sit down and had some kind of conversation and hopefully at least had some kind of mending there, other than just, it's just so broken now. And I feel for these kids that are going through any of this kind of discrimination, harassment, bullying, all the stuff that we hear about.
One of the things that kind of give me strength and hope in all of this is the resiliency of our kids.
Yes.
Not that you want to test them all the time, because that's not cool, and it's not fair. But doggone it, we've done some things right along the way because they're pretty cool, and they seem to have that ability. And that's another thing that's clear in the film. When you look at that, you go like, oh, that looks like a Broadway production. And yet every single component was created by our kids, because all of the kids in this are our kids, and it doesn't matter if they went to Yahoo school, this school, or whatever. When they come into our space, they're our kids, and that's our job, so that's the ray
Mm.
of hope, in this, is that, we'll have that opportunity to help bend that curve. a little bit.
As you said, though, we need to do it right. Get all of our. Gather all of our ducks and get them in a row.
Yeah, I think so. For our next meeting, I think it would be appropriate for us to come back with some suggestions.
Mhm.
Or consider. Or contemplate. And
Sure.
figure out. How to go forward. with the filming. Makes sense?
All right, I think we've completed our discussion on that important topic, so I guess we're now at public comment. Anybody out in TV land, Roy?
One human being.
Not
I've
all
not
of
seen
that.
any hand up though, so I don't believe there's a comment.
Okay,
Almost
any,
certainly our faithful scribe.
No, beyond that, no.
Oh, yeah. Okay. In the hinterland.
all right,
Then, shall I make the motion? Okay, I move that we find that it is necessary to hold an executive session to discuss agreements, and that we enter into such executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313 subsection A1.
Do I have a
I'm
second?
sorry,
Second.
A1 D, so it's not A.
I'll second.
all right. All those in favor?
I,
No opposed, so motion carries. At what? 6:30?
7:34.
Oh, 7, yeah, okay,
7th.
yeah, I'm not wearing my glasses. At 10:35. Okay, so we're officially.
Yep.
Well,